Okay, close your eyes for just a second. I want you to imagine it's 2007. The world's absolute smartest economists, the most powerful Wall Street bankers, these ultra-savvy investors, and massive governments all agree on one major thing. Everything is completely 100% under control. The predictive models are just humming along, the economic forecasts look absolutely phenomenal, and predictability is the name of the game. All right, keep that in mind as we dive into this explainer.
Because now, I want you to fast forward literally just one single year. We go from this supreme, totally unshakable confidence in 2007 straight into absolute screaming global panic in 2008. The entire global financial system didn't just wobble, it nearly collapsed completely. The contrast is just staggering. I mean, how on earth do you go from "we have everything completely figured out" to a worldwide catastrophe in just 12 short months?
And the sheer unimaginable scale of the fallout was totally devastating. We're talking trillions, with a T, just vanishing into thin air. Poof, gone. And behind that massive, kind of abstract number, were millions of everyday people who suddenly, without any warning at all from the quote-unquote experts, lost their jobs, their homes, and their entire life savings.
Which brings us to the central mystery we're tackling today. Why did the experts fail so spectacularly? Because here's the really shocking part. They weren't just guessing in the dark. They had mountains of data. Petabytes of historical trends, incredibly complex algorithms, and just massive computing power right at their fingertips. And yet, they still failed. So how could the people with the absolute most information be so entirely wrong about the future?
Let's get into Section 1, the illusion of predictability and really why we crave certainty so much.
Look, humans are biologically hardwired to crave certainty. We want to know exactly what's going to happen next, simply so we can feel safe. We're constantly asking, which stock is going to rise? Which business is going to succeed? What's the safest career path? But the core problem here is a fundamental misunderstanding of reality itself. According to our source material, Radical Uncertainty, our forecasting doesn't fail from a lack of information or computing power. It fails because the future itself is simply unknowable. It's not a giant jigsaw puzzle that's just waiting for a few more data pieces. It's a blank canvas that hasn't even been painted yet. Moving on to Section 2, Risk versus Radical Uncertainty. This is the core concept of the whole thing. This is arguably the most important paradigm shift we're going to cover today, the profound difference between risk and uncertainty. We kind of use those words interchangeably in everyday life, right? But they actually split the world into two totally different camps. On side A, we have risk. This exists when the probabilities are mathematically known. It's like rolling a dice. You know exactly what the odds are because there are only 6 possible outcomes. But over on side B, we have uncertainty. Uncertainty exists when nobody knows the odds, and it's actually worse than that. We don't even know all the possible outcomes. We're talking about things like future technologies, massive economic crises, sudden global pandemics, or unexpected wars. These are the great unknowns.
And here is the kicker. Most of the truly important decisions in life and business involve that radical uncertainty, not calculable risk. This is exactly where the giant trillion-dollar mistakes begin. People, and especially highly educated data-driven experts, they often treat the great unknown as if it were just a simple, calculable dice roll. They try to slap a neat little mathematical formula onto the wild, totally unpredictable real world.
Which brings us to Section 3, Why the Experts Fail. Let's talk about the data trap. There is this massive myth in our modern world, the blind belief that just gathering more data automatically guarantees perfect predictions. And I mean, it sounds logical, right? More data should equal more foresight, but it's actually a really dangerous trap. To make sense of all that infinite data, experts build these incredibly complex models, but those models are built entirely on fragile human assumptions. They basically assume tomorrow is going to behave generally like yesterday. But when reality shifts unexpectedly, or when some totally unprecedented variable enters the equation, those historical assumptions shatter, and the entire model falls apart in an instant.
If you need proof, just look at this list of massive, world-altering events. Severe financial crashes, major political upheavals, massive technological revolutions, global pandemics. These are the exact types of events that actually shape our world, and almost no expert predicted them accurately. The data models completely missed them. They were total blindsides. And that proves, once and for all, that historical data absolutely does not equal future foresight.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, hold on, looking back, the 2008 crash seems totally obvious. Well, that brings us to something called hindsight bias.
This is literally our storytelling brain actively playing tricks on us. It's the human tendency to create neat, tidy, logical stories after an event happens just to convince ourselves that it was obvious all along. But the actual truth? Before these major events happen, the future is incredibly messy and totally unclear. It's only after the fact that we weave this comfortable little story to make ourselves feel better, just to make the world feel predictable again.
Let's pivot a bit for Section 4. Adaptability beats perfect prediction. Here is the big business and investment lesson.
So, if perfectly predicting the big stuff is essentially impossible, what do we actually do? Well, we definitely don't just throw our hands up in defeat. Instead, we look at the absolute masters of adaptation, companies like Amazon, Netflix, and Apple. The core secret to their astronomical success wasn't some magic crystal ball that predicted exactly what consumers would want 10 years down the road. In fact, they rarely predicted the future perfectly. They succeeded because they remained radically flexible. When massive uncertainty appeared, like when the internet suddenly shifted or video streaming became technologically possible, they adapted instantly. They proved that rapid adaptation will always beat rigid prediction.
And that exact same rule applies to investing. The markets are driven by wildly unpredictable influences. We're talking human emotions like fear, panic, and greed, unexpected global events, sudden new technologies that just disrupt legacy industries overnight, and totally arbitrary political decisions made behind closed doors. Honestly, how on earth do you plug volatile human emotion in sudden political chaos into a neat mathematical model? You can't. No model can fully capture those unpredictable variables.
So, smart investors, they do not spend all their energy and capital trying to precisely pinpoint one perfect predicted outcome. Doing that is simply gambling on a guess. Instead, they actively prepare for multiple possibilities. Phenomenal success in the markets, and in business for that matter, comes from navigating uncertainty, protecting yourself against the downside, and being ready for a wide range of futures. It does not come from trying to magically eliminate the unknown completely.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Thriving in the Unknown. Let's bring this down to a personal life lesson.
Because these concepts go way beyond the boardroom and the stock exchange, right? Think about the absolute biggest decisions you will ever make in your personal life. Getting married, choosing a major career path, deciding to risk everything to start a brand new business, packing up your whole life and moving to a new city or country. These are textbook decisions of radical uncertainty. You simply cannot run a mathematical formula to find a perfect, risk-free answer for these milestones. You are never, ever going to have 100% of the guarantee. You absolutely must act despite having incomplete information.
So how do you actually do that successfully? The authors of our source material give us this brilliantly simple, actionable framework. Step 1. Stop obsessing over trying to perfectly predict every future event. It is literally an exhausting waste of your energy. Step 2. Shift that focus entirely into building personal resilience. You want a foundation that can withstand a sudden shock. And Step 3. Actively develop adaptable skills, a high learning ability, and strong relationships. Because the future is always going to throw massive surprises at us. The people who thrive are the ones who have the flexibility and the network to pivot when the ground inevitably shifts beneath them.
Which leaves us with this final provocative question. Will you wait for certainty or will you act? The single biggest mistake people make in life, in investing and in business, is waiting around for absolute certainty before they take action. But as we've explored today, true certainty rarely comes. The future has always been radically uncertain, and it always will be. The people who truly succeed aren't the ones holding the perfect crystal ball or the most complex data model. They are the ones who learn to move forward confidently and adaptably, despite not knowing exactly what comes next. That is the true power of navigating the unknowable. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.